Hello, let's take a look at muscular activity during gait. Let's start at the hip joint. At initial contact and foot flat, gluteals are activated concentrically to bring the hip into extension. At mid-stance, the ground reaction force moves posterior to the hip joint, yet the hip continues moving into extension, thus requiring hip flexors to work eccentrically up until the toe-off. At toe-off, the hip moves into flexion, thus requiring concentric activation of hip flexors up until the mid-swing. Starting from the mid-swing, the momentum takes over. The gluteals are working eccentrically, controlling the swing of the moving limb up until the initial contact. Now, let's take a look at the ankle joint. At the initial contact and foot flat, dorsiflexors are working eccentrically to lower the foot to the ground. At foot flat, there is a sudden moment of change of ground reaction force anterior to the axis of rotation of the ankle, thus activating plantar flexors eccentrically to control closed chain dorsiflexion at the ankle joint. At mid-stance to heel off, we notice a considerable change in ankle range of motion, moving into 20 degrees of flexion. Plantar flexors are firing concentrically in order to push the foot off the ground and propel the body forward. Toe-off to mid-swing, foot has to return to a neutral position, thus dorsiflexors are working concentrically to clear the foot off the ground. And finally, from mid-swing to initial contact, dorsiflexors are working isometrically, clearing the foot off the ground and preparing for the heel strike. Lastly, let's examine muscular activity at the knee joint. At initial contact, hamstrings are working concentrically, conjointly with the hip extensors in order to extend the hip. Additionally, since the knee is moving into flexion right after the initial contact, the ground reaction force rapidly changes its position and moves posterior to the knee joint, thus requiring eccentric knee extensor activation to control the degree of knee flexion and to prevent the knee from buckling. From foot flat to mid-stance, knee moves into extension, hence knee extensors are working concentrically. At mid-stance, we notice a brief spike in eccentric hamstring activity, followed by a concentric activation of hamstrings at heel-off. From toe-off to mid-swing, quadriceps are working eccentrically and the knee is being carried into flexion by a passive mechanism driven by flexion at the hip joint. From mid-swing to initial contact, there is a brief activation of eccentric hamstrings to control the momentum that is carrying the knee into extension. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, give it a like.